In a typical pre-modern home, children began their day with a mug of beer. Before the arrival of clean water, this was a standard requirement for almost every meal. At Harvard College in the 1700s, students were handed a pint of beer every single morning with their breakfast. This supply was considered a vital utility. In 1639, Harvard's first president was removed from his post, partly because the campus beer supply had run dry. Parents and institutions across the colonies treated alcohol as a mandatory daily staple for children. They relied on it to solve a biological problem that they did not yet fully understand. For centuries, European city rivers functioned as open sewers. Butchers dumped animal carcasses, and tanneries poured chemical waste directly into the same streams where families collected their drinking water. These sources were often thick with the bacteria that cause cholera and typhoid. However, without a concept of germ theory, the public had no way to identify the microscopic threats in the water. Doctors instead relied on the theory of miasma, the idea that illness was caused by bad air and foul smells. This belief led to a dangerous conclusion. If water looked clear and smelled fresh, it was assumed to be safe for a child to drink. That assumption proved fatal for millions. Eventually, communities noticed a grim survival pattern. Families who drank from the local well often buried their children, while those who drank only beer survived. Chapter 2. The Brewing Solution. The protection beer offered wasn't a miracle, it was a byproduct of the brewing process itself. Every batch of beer begins by boiling the water. Though they didn't know it at the time, brewers were accidentally heat-treating their water supply and killing the pathogens that caused dysentery and cholera. The fermentation process then introduced alcohol, creating a chemical environment that further inhibited the growth of dangerous microbes. Finally, the addition of hops served as a mild, natural preservative, helping the liquid stay drinkable for longer than plain water. This everyday drink was known as small beer, a thin, cloudy, porridge-like liquid with an alcohol content of only 1 to 3%. Because small beer spoiled within days, it required a constant cycle of production. This task fell largely to alewives, women who managed complex brewing operations out of their own kitchens to keep their neighborhoods supplied. Brewing functioned as a mandatory biological technology, an exhausting weekly cycle required to keep a household from dying of dehydration. Small beer was so essential to the economy that the English government passed the Assize Bread and Ale, a law that strictly regulated its price and ensured it was included as a standard portion of a laborer's wages. The need for beer even dictated the landing of the Mayflower. The Pilgrims settled at Plymouth instead of their original Virginia destination because their ship's beer supply was nearly depleted and they could not risk a longer search for land. The British Royal Navy scaled this up to a massive degree, issuing every sailor a full gallon of beer per day. They knew from experience that water casks stored in a ship's hold would turn toxic long before a barrel of beer would. This dependence extended into the industrial workforce. In the 1720s, Benjamin Franklin observed London printers drinking 6 pints of beer a day as they operated these heavy, wooden mechanical presses. Franklin's co-workers were often deeply in debt to the local alehouse, yet they remained convinced that the beer was the only thing giving them the strength to perform such grueling physical labor. From the Atlantic crossing to the printing press, the early modern world operated on a beer-fueled supply chain because the concept of a safe public water source did not yet exist. Chapter 3. The Water Revolution. In 1854, a cholera outbreak devastated the Soho district of London. Public health officials initially looked to the air, blaming the miasma of the crowded streets for the deaths. Dr. John Snow suspected the water instead. He interviewed grieving families and plotted every death on a map of the neighborhood, revealing a dense cluster of fatalities surrounding the public water pump on Broad Street. Snow persuaded local authorities to remove the pump's handle. Without access to that specific water source, the number of new cholera cases in the area plummeted almost immediately. Snow died before the medical establishment fully accepted his theory, but that pump remains today, a permanent marker of the discovery that ended the Soho outbreak. By mapping the deaths, Snow made the invisible connection between human waste and disease visible to the world, providing the first real evidence that humanity could survive without the safety net of brewing. In the following decades, the work of scientists like Louis Pasteur provided the biological proof for Snow's observations, leading to the global acceptance of germ theory. This scientific shift triggered a massive engineering movement. Cities began building the complex sewer systems and filtration plants required to deliver safe water directly into homes. As clean water became a reliable public utility, the requirement for small beer faded. Children were eventually transitioned to water and milk, and beer took on its modern role as a recreational choice. Societies moved away from fermented rations as they gained access to water they could finally trust. The reliability of the tap ended a 500-year era of mandatory alcohol. Subscribe to the channel for more hidden history.